You know, a lot of people have a love-hate relationship with the drop shot, but it's actually a really super simple technique. Doesn't take a lot of equipment to get the drop shot in your hand. It catches big fish, it catches small fish, it catches fish in the toughest of conditions, and it's used in tournaments all over the country. And in today, I'm gonna get you dialed in on the drop shot. This video is sponsored by Waterland Fishing Optics. Waterland makes awesome sunglasses specifically for fishermen. They're built by fishermen for fishermen. They got all kinds of technology built into the lenses to help you see into the water and ultimately catch more fish. So head over to waterlandco.com, use discount code LUNA15. It's gonna help you save 15% off. Again, that's waterlandco.com, use discount code LUNA15. The drop shot is a technique that you can use a lot of different rods and reels and get away with it. But I do think when you tailor things specifically for the drop shot, you're gonna have better success. You're gonna feel everything like you're supposed to. You're gonna be able to fight the fish effectively. You're not gonna be pulling hooks out or anything like that. You're not gonna be bending hooks out. You're just gonna be able to get more bites and land more fish. So one of the first things that I look to when it comes to picking out a drop shot setup is the rod that I'm gonna be using. A major mistake that I see people make when fishing the drop shot is they have too heavy of a rod. You don't want a medium heavy rod fishing the drop shot. You want medium or medium light. Those are the two options you have when it comes to fishing the drop shot. Now, in a pinch, can you use a medium heavy rod? Sure. But I would highly recommend, if you're a drop shot fisherman, to have the right equipment for the drop shot setup. And for a rod, it's a medium to medium light action. This is important because that medium light or medium action is gonna help you cast those small weights, those small baits, and that light line. When you set the hook, having an action in that rod that tapers a little bit, that's not too stiff, is gonna help you to not break the line on the hook set, not break that line on the fight back to the boat, because a lot of times that drop shot's gonna get you big bites because those fish are finicky, they don't wanna eat, and that little drop shot just sitting there is gonna get that bigger fish to bite sometimes, and you're gonna need the right equipment in order to actually land that fish. Having the right action out of your rod is very important as well. You need something with a softer tip. You need something that's gonna bend, because when you set that hook, you need that rod tip to bend, but also have enough little backbone in the bottom end of that rod to be able to get that hook into the fish. But if that fish is fighting and it surges and you have something that's not giving enough, it's gonna break that line. If you set the hook and that rod tip doesn't give it all, it's gonna break that line on the hook set. So make sure that you have the right action and the right weight rating for your rod. Now, I prefer to have a spinning rod when I'm fishing the drop shot, because when I'm dragging that light weight along the bottom, I just feel like I have better bottom contact with that spinning rod. Now, the specific rods that I use are 6 cents rods. I use the Milliken, I use the Lux, I use the Divine, I use the USA Custom. I fall in love with that USA Custom. If you're looking for a high-end rod, I highly recommend that USA Custom. But I've also caught a ton of fish on the Milliken and the Lux. But I would get the best rod that you can afford, because sensitivity and weight all factor into it. And you want a rod that's super sensitive, and you want a rod that's super light, because a lot of times the lighter rods are the more sensitive rods. So the second mistake that I see people make is they have the wrong spinning reel. You don't want that little tiny trout reel, and you don't want that big giant saltwater reel. I like to stick with that 2,500 to 3,000 size in my spinning reels. I think it ends up being the perfect size all around. Generally, when we're fishing a spinning setup, it's finesse fishing. The fishing's tough. We got light line, we got light weights, we got light rods, we have all these different things that are at our disadvantage. Having the right spinning reel, not necessarily brand, not necessarily model, but having a quality spinning reel is gonna counteract a lot of those disadvantages and help us catch more fish and land more fish. And you want something with a very good quality drag. You don't want something that's gonna stick, because a lower end reel might have a sticky drag. You don't wanna be fighting that fish, that drag is going, and then all of a sudden it just sticks, and then you snap that line because you got a light line on that drop shot. So the reason that I pay attention to the weight of my spinning reel is because something that's too heavy is going to overweight your rod. It's going to be out of balance, and it's going to take away some of the sensitivity that you have in that rod. A properly balanced rod with a light reel on it is going to be the most sensitive that it can be. And when fishing those light weights down on the bottom, feeling those rocks with that small tiny weight, you need something sensitive so that way you can feel it on the bottom, and you can feel everything you need to feel, and you can feel the difference between a bite and those rocks. That's the key, because if every time you feel a rock you think it's a bite and you're setting the hook, you're not as effective down there as you can be. But when you can tell the difference between the bottom composition and a bite, you're going to be much better at getting fish hooked and getting a lot more bites. So one of the reasons why I pay attention to having the right size reel as well, I like to say, like I said, in that 2,500 to 3,000 size, is because it pulls in a lot of line. Having a little tiny trout reel isn't pulling in a lot of line for every turn of the reel. You want to have something that brings in a lot of line. It's going to help you get to that hook set a little bit faster, and when those fish are swimming back at you, you're able to reel up that slack and keep some tension on that fish to keep it from throwing your hook. So having the right equipment, right size, right weight, and right drag are all key when it comes to the drop shot. The reels that I specifically throw are the Daiwa Tatula LT and the Shimano Vanford. I don't have a reel sponsor, guys, so those are literally the reels that I'm using. I'm paying for them with my own money, and I found that they are great. They have great drag systems on them. They cast a mile, they're lightweight, they pair up with your drop shot rods really, really well. I know that they might be out of reach for some people, so I've included a discount code and a link to them, so that way you can save a little bit of money off the reels if those are something that you want to look into. Guys, stop using the wrong line when it comes to fishing the drop shot. There's things that you can do with just your line, not only save yourself money, but to maximize sensitivity and maximize the amount of bites you're going to get. So I know some guys out there are fishing their spinning reels, their drop shots, whatever, on straight fluorocarbon. And I think that's a mistake, guys. One of these simple things that you guys can do to your spinning rods, to your drop shot setup, is have braided main line. That braid's gonna last you so much longer. It's so much more sensitive, and that's what I put on my spinning reels myself. I use the Seaguar Smackdown braided line. I've come to love that stuff. There's other good quality braids out on the market, but that's the one that I have fallen in love with. Guys, it casts a mile. It's super sensitive. You're gonna feel every little tick down there on the bottom. It gives you no stretch, so you feel everything down the bottom. I highly recommend you get some braided line and put that on your main line as your line that goes on the actual reel. And then you need to add a fluorocarbon leader onto the end of that when you're fishing something like the drop shot, which we're gonna talk more about right now. So with my fluorocarbon leaders, I use around 10 to 12 foot of leader line. I feel like it gets that knot and my braid way far away from the bait, so that way I'm maximizing the invisibility that fluorocarbon offers. Now I like to stay in that 6 to 8 pound test range too. I feel like that's very important. I don't want heavy line, and I don't want super light line if I can help it. There are times where I might go down to 5 pound test if the fish are really, really finicky. I've been in situations where that 5 pound test was the only way I could get bit. I don't think it's because the fish get line shy in terms of they can see the line. I think it's just something about the action. It's a little bit more free than it is with that 6 to 8 pound test, and that 5 pound test, if you have some for yourself, it does feel a little bit different. So I just think it has a little bit of a different action down there in the water. Guys, having a high quality fluorocarbon line is key. I like to use Sunline, I use Seaguar, I use Gamma, but I stick between that 6 and 8 pound test, but I do carry some smaller lines in the boats for those situations where those fish just don't want to bite at all, and the last ditch effort is to go down in line size. So if you have basically anything from 5 to 8, you got your finesse situations covered. So mistake number 4 with the drop shot is they are using too heavy of a weight. You want to use the lightest weight that you can get away with. If you can fish a 1/8 ounce weight and feel the bottom, that's the one you want to fish. If you can't feel it, then you're going to go up a little bit. I use a weight from an 1/8 ounce up to a 3/8 ounce, whether it's lead or tungsten. Basically, the main difference between lead and tungsten is lead is cheaper, but tungsten is more dense. That means it's going to be more sensitive than lead is. So if you're fishing around a lot of rock and you need that sensitivity to feel the difference between a bite and a rock, then you might want to go with that tungsten. But if you're fishing around grass or something a little bit softer where you don't really need all that sensitivity coming out of your weight, then you can go with lead, and you don't need to tie your line to that swivel. You simply just pull that line up into the swivel until it gets tight. It's designed so that way if you get that weight snagged in the bottom, you can pull that line out and you just lose the weight and not the entire setup. So guys, mistake number 5 that I see people make with the drop shot is they have the wrong size hook. You don't want a big giant gaff on the end of your line. You want a smaller hook. You're going to want to stay in the size 1 to 1/0 hooks. The hook is key. You need a very sharp hook on the drop shot. It's going to be a smaller hook. I use 2 different ones. I either use a drop shot style hook for nose hook presentations, or I use a straight shank light wire hook for my weedless presentations. It's basically it, guys. Those two different options are gonna have you covered when it comes to the drop shot. If you're fishing around heavy cover and you need to have a weedless presentation, then go with that straight shade style hook. If you're in open water scenarios, go with that nose hook. It's gonna give you better hookup ratios overall, but make sure it's a light wire and it's sharp. Those are the main things you wanna pay attention to. Another mistake that I see people make with the drop shot is they got these crazy style baits on there, guys. You need something subtle, you need something small, because in most situations when you're fishing the drop shot, high pressure situations, the fish just don't want to bite, so you want something natural, you need something small. So don't go out there and get your giant crazy baits to go on the drop shot. There might be scenarios where guys catch fish doing that, but in general, you're going to want something small, you're going to want something natural. I'm really falling in love with the 6-inch glitch. It's a 3.8-inch bait. It's a little minnow presentation, goby presentation, but just stick to those staples, natural colors, whatever you're trying to imitate, whether it's a shad, worm, whatever, go with natural colors, because a lot of times fishing the drop shot, you're gonna be in clear water as well. One of the great things about the drop shot is that it's a year-around bait. I fish this thing from summer to winter, fall, spring. I've got a drop shot tied on all the time. It's gonna be one of the best baits that you can throw when the fishing is tough. When you can't get a bite, that's where the drop shot shines, guys. If you take the information that I presented in this video, it's going to help you catch more fish. Those days where you don't know what to throw, try a drop shot. I bet you're gonna get some bites, and I bet you're gonna catch some fish. And don't be surprised if you get a big one on one of those tough days on a drop shot.